Good morning and welcome to Hacking HR's Creating Your Personal Career Development Plan session. I am your moderator, Lauren Lefkowitz. I'm so glad to be here with you. I am a 20-year HR veteran, my last position being as an HR executive turned full-time executive coach. And I'm so excited to be here talking about career development. And I've got some amazing panelists with me today. And so let's bring them on stage to come and chat with us. Amazing. You're all here. Awesome. So panelists, thank you so much for being here. This is like always such like a fun surprise because we're mostly, if not all, meeting each other for the first time. So I'm so excited to hear from all of you and to hear what your thoughts are on all of the things we're going to talk about. We have a ton of great questions today, and I can't wait to hear from everybody. But before we do that, let's just do quick 30-second introductions. Tell us who you are, where you are, what you do. And we'll start with Tammy and go to Joe next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tammy Chapik. I'm an executive leadership coach, and I am located in Columbus, Ohio.
Welcome, Joe, and then Lara.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Pope. I am based in Chicago, and I'm the director of HR operations overseeing performance and talent management at a national law firm.
Terrific. Lara, and then Chris.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lara Martinez Gonzalez. I'm the Global Talent Strategy Director for AstraZeneca, and I define myself as a career development architect. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I'm calling today from Boston, Massachusetts.
Terrific. Welcome. Chris, and then Renzi.
Hi, I'm Chris Deaver, a culture shaper, executive coach with Brave Corps, and I'm in the Bay Area. Good to be here.
Excellent. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Renzi. I am a founder and managing director of Perky People, which is an employee experience consulting company. And I am currently joining from New Zealand, but I'm usually based in Dubai.
Wow, terrific. All right, so let's start. And panelists, as you have a response to give, just come off mute, pay attention to who's coming off of mute, and I'd love to get input from you on every question. Let's just start with like what a career development plan is, right? Because sometimes we throw out lingo and people think it's one thing or another thing. And so let's get ourselves on the same page with what is a career development plan? What's the purpose of it?
I would imagine we all probably have a slightly different definition of that too. When I work with my clients, we put together a career vision map first and foremost, because I think we can all have aspirations for where we want to be. And for some, it's the end of the line where I want to retire to. And for some, it's the next step and I'm figuring it out as I go. So I sit with my clients and we kind of dream to where they, as far as they know. And sometimes it's, a title or titles. And then we work backwards from there. And so we map it out from here to here to here, and then go between what are those gaps that I have that I need to get from here to there, and then putting the strategies together of how to get from here to there. So identifying what's missing, talents, skills, experiences, and then the plan on how to get them. Sometimes it's coaching, sometimes it's actual experiences, sometimes it's classes or certifications, whatever those things are.
Thanks so much. What would any of you add to that?
I had the same thought. I think it's around vision, right? And with that, oftentimes, there's not always a concrete sense of like how to connect the dots going forward. Usually that happens looking back. But, to Tammy's point, I think having a clear sense as much as you can of what the building blocks are. And then it becomes kind of a conversation with your future self, right? Or your best future self, and the things that you want or really need to like manifest, right? And those are going to be different for everybody. And sometimes it's in the 10-year timeline, or it could be longer or shorter. But I think of it, it's those building blocks. Kind of what are those core elements that tie into our strengths and the things that we're really passionate about that are inside of our hearts, right? That make our hearts sing or sing. And and if it's there, then the power to accomplish it is also there.
And I think it's changing too, right? So when we think about career mapping, in the traditional sense, it's thinking about your destination, right? And how do you get there? What are the steps to take, the people to introduce yourself to, and the training and development that needs to occur. What I'm also seeing happening, at least in the past few years, is more of an emphasis on exploration. And so if you think about it in terms of traveling, for example, right, you might go somewhere and know I have to hit these spots to eventually reach this destination. But some other times when you're traveling, you might not have a plan and you might just want to check out different places in this specific area. And so the challenge that we have as HR leaders is to really foster both those that have a clear destination and those that are still just trying to figure out what they want to do, and help them figure out within our own constraints of our company, and even outside of the company sometimes, how can we help facilitate that exploration.
I'd like to echo what Joe said there because I have personal experience there. I started after uni as a flight attendant. For 7 years, I worked as a flight attendant. It never crossed my mind that I would end up in HR. For the past 15 years, I've been working in HR now, that I would end up in HR. It was basically an accidental discovery, starting with the training, and then from training, moving into the whole gamut of HR. So yes, career development is having, maybe not necessarily having full clarity of where you want to be as your destination, but it's more of an aspiration. Like what Tammy said, my aspiration is to become a doctor in the next 10 years. But somewhere down the line, you realize that actually, you know what? I actually enjoy more doing research. So I want to become a researcher. So yes, it's putting in place something, but also understanding like what are the skill sets that you're building when you create this destination for yourself, and then how understanding what am I passionate about, what am I talented, and what are my skill sets, and how can I leverage on these three things to see what would be good for me in the future.
Yeah, and if I can add something, following that metaphor of the map, and building on what our colleague was saying, there is something around getting ready for that journey, right? So to your point, like we can have a map, and a map full of possibilities and different stuff that we can take along the way, different routes, shortcuts, forests, whatever it is. And also like need to understand where do we start and what do we need to pack in our suitcase or our backpack to do that journey. So I think there is a piece around also raising awareness about where you are right now. What tools do you have? What clothes do you have on your closet? What are the things that you have with you that can help you get closer to that destination? And maybe realizing that along the road, you need to do some stops to purchase new stuff or acquire new skills. So really get some help along the journey. So a couple of thoughts there. So that piece around making sure that you are aware about where are you starting from. And the other one, that you are not alone on that journey. So sometimes we think about career development as like, oh, I'm just doing this on my own, being adventurous. And sometimes it's like there's many people around you that are willing to help. Try to identify who is on your journey with you to help you get to your destination.
And what a beautiful lead-in to our next set of questions. So thank you, everybody, for the introduction of what we're talking about today. And as we talk today, we are talking about the yous out there. So often as HR professionals, we're coming into the room to figure out, how do we help our organization? How do we elevate other people? When you're talking about your own career development plan, we're talking about you directly. Some of what you learned today, some of what you hear today is going to help you with other people, of course, right? And going to help you coach other people. But when you're thinking about this, and if you have questions that you want to put into the comment section, think about you and your own career development plan. So as we step into a little bit more specifics, what are some of the tools? And Laura, you started mentioning this, but what are some of the tools you can use, right? Sometimes it's so hard to figure out where to even start because we're so caught up in our day-to-day. So what are some of the tools that you've used for yourselves and that you would recommend that other people use to even figure out what they want their career path to be from here forward?
Mm-hmm. I think definitely starting with self-awareness, like understanding what are your strengths, what are the things that you really like to do, how do you like to work, what type of people do you want to be surrounded with is important. So taking that time to reflect from your own perspective on based on your experience, what are the things that you like, and then obviously asking for feedback from people that have worked with you. And feedback can come from many places. It's not only your work colleagues, can be your family, can be your friends, people who knows you very well, who can help you identify what are the things that drives you and when are you at your best. And once you have identified a bit of that starting point, like your the suitcase content, let's say, is exploring what is your destination. So looking at people that you admire and how did they get there, looking at job descriptions that are appealing to you, looking at talking to people that surround you and asking them about their own career paths. So it's like gathering information about the surroundings, and then identifying what's the gap. What do I need to do to get there? What do I have that I can foster to get me there, or what am I missing today that I can use to get there? And with that, you can start to define some of the interventions that you want to do for yourself to get you there.
Yeah, I think with that too, acknowledging kind of we live in a time that there's a lot of change happening. I mean, significant, right? Like Peter Thiel has a quote, set your 10-year plan and accomplish it in 6 months. And I think we've all had our 10-year plans handed to us in 6 months, and sometimes it feels like in 6 days or 6 minutes, right? With the advent of AI and all these things that are accelerating in the job market and what the implications of that are. But I think, to Laura's point, it's like stepping back, zooming out, and getting very intuitive and focused on what's core, because that won't change, right? Thomas Friedman, I was in a meeting, he wrote The World is Flat. It was like 20 years ago. He said in a meeting, in the future, we're going to be writing our own job descriptions. And, we're living in that future, and it may not be in the full sense, right? We still have job descriptions, but that was kind of in that holistic sense that, I was when I was working at Disney, I would get frustrated sometimes because some of the core HR work I wasn't always interested in. It was kind of the nuts and bolts stuff. And I met with a VP of talent, and he said, about 60% he said about 40% of what you do is just the basics of your job. And then 60% you're going to be inventing. And this is true of most roles. And so I think, how do we intuit and start to build on what can create, find those vacuums and expand into it? And to Laura's point, it's figuring out, intuiting for ourselves. And part of that soul search is, I think, looking back and asking ourselves, when were those moments that we felt the most passionate and just in the flow, right, in our lives? And where were we, right? What job were we doing? What work were we doing, right? The kind of flow we feel when we make music or, or painting or whatever we love, right? Sports, hiking, and in a similar way in our work. And then the second part of that that's helpful, I found, is maybe it's also, where was the pain, right? Where was the struggle so deep, something that was so frustrating and challenging, but it offered you a way to elevate, and you found it to be something that you could dig into. I think those are some opportunities that can help us find the insight, as to what we can build on.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think everything Lara and Chris has said is so powerful, and I have nothing to add to it other than just a different way to look at the same concepts. I think it's so powerful when we can understand what it is that fills our cup and what it is that takes away, or what it is that we can kind of innovate off of to make us, give us inspiration to move forward. And, we spend so much of our lives in our jobs that we can't say, well, I just go to work. That's not the world we live in anymore. That's the world our parents and our parents lived in. But it's different today, and we have the opportunity to take advantage of that. So 2 tools I use with my clients when they're in kind of this struggle. First and foremost, it's a 3-column exercise, and I have them think about their current role and prior roles. And it's literally, 1 column is love. So what are those things that fill me up? Those things that when I'm in flow, I lose all track of time. On the left and on the right, what are those things that are depleting, draining, the hate column, the dislike column, whatever word you want to put there. And then the neutral, the things that are neither here nor there. And then when they go through the love column, we look there, we prioritize there, and then get really creative. What can you do with the things in the love column that fills up more of your time? And how to focus there. The other exercise, and a lot of it is, are you a right brain thinker, a left brain thinker? How can you really kind of start to slice the information? Is the what do you want to be known for exercise? And that can be today, how do you want to be seen in the office or wherever you're working, or at retirement, and like think long term. And so again, it's how do you think, how do you process information, how can you visualize yourself? And some people are really good at it. At the end of the day, I want to be known for these things, or no, today I want people to think about me in this regard, and that helps them really frame up next steps of their career.
I just want to add to like what Tammy said about the tools, because what personally also worked for me. This was born out of pandemic when I decided to take a leap of like setting up my own business. Because for some time it's like just been like, okay, HR, what can I do? So I'm gonna echo also what Deaver said, something about what actually motivates you, what energizes you. So going back to Tammy's tool, what worked for me also was really listing down what are my skills at the moment that I have built over time from my experience, from different companies, from different roles. Okay, what am I passionate about, which may not necessarily be things that I'm skilled at, but I just want to do them because that gives me energy. And then also understanding what am I talented about? I never learned these skills, but I'm just really, really good at these things. And then work with maybe a career coach, or anyone, just to ask you questions around like from these things, what really energizes you, what motivates you, or to Tammy's point earlier, like, well, what don't you like? What do you like? Like, I think this is a very simple exercise, but very powerful, which will uncover things that you may not necessarily think about when you go down the route of typical, let's define first what is my end goal. Because when you start with that, it gets confusing because there's a whole range of what can I do, and it's so conflicting for a lot of people with all these fancy titles, especially if your goal is to become an employee or in the future, not necessarily owning your business. So yeah, I think I would start with something like that, but also work with a coach if you don't have one, because it's equally rewarding just to have someone maybe even just replay what you usually say, because you don't always hear yourself.
The only other thing I would add to that is to network. Talk to people who are doing the roles that you're interested in. What's on paper might not be the reality in the day, right? And so having those informal conversations about their experience and not only how they got to that point, but also what are some of the struggles that they experience day to day? What are some of the skills that they think are very important to be successful in that type of role? I think that could help you validate whether that's a destination you want to pursue or not. I know for me, there have been some areas of HR even where I thought, gosh, that seems very interesting. And then when I started to talk to those number of people who were already doing that role, I thought, you know what? I have some self-awareness that's going to drain me. That's not going to fulfill me. So that's another piece of advice that I'd have.
Great advice, everybody. There are a couple of points I want to touch on that you all mentioned, but what I really love about what each of you mentioned is the self-focus, right? We get so lost in what we're doing for others that it's easy to forget about what we want, right? So Tammy, to your point, I do that with my clients as well, sorting through like, what do you actually like? Figuring out what are the pieces and parts that you actually like, researching what those things are if they're standalones. Early in my career, I thought I wanted to do employee relations all the time. I did not. It turned out I enjoyed it as a piece of my job, but I thought that eventually I would specialize in employee relations. And because I was on a path, I thought that was my path. So as we move into the next question, what can people think about who have gotten onto a path, right? When you're early in your career, you may dance around a little bit, but once you get onto a path, how do you carve out time? How do you carve out resources? How do you even network, right? How do you do that so that you're not just going along this straight upward line where you've decided on a specialty or you've decided to be a generalist and that's the only path you can see?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I look back and I think when we personalize, all of us have been through a journey. I think that's a theme that we're hearing. I look back far enough, and I had thoughts about being an accountant. I wanted to, be in the business world, and then I had this fear of being, trapped in a cubicle and being bald, and feeling like I'm stuck in a cave. Of course, I couldn't avoid the bald part, but what I realized was there was things that I did or didn't want to do, and I think first just acknowledging that and just sitting in that. I mean, to Joe's point, is very important. And Renzi, it's a good example too of being able to pivot, right? And have be brave enough to pivot, because I think what happens is sometimes we settle into the fear as a baseline, and it may be conscious or subconscious fear that the unknown, right? Or just the security of having a safe job. But what we're seeing is a safe job, let's call it. First of all, it's not a good idea for your mental health, right? You end up contributing, but you're frustrated. Sometimes it's the unhealthy stress. And so I think getting clear, as clear as we can about what we don't want, can help us know what we want. I had a moment too, and I was actually on a path to, I studied animation. So I was in school. I was preparing for the dream of working at Disney. I wrote to Roy Disney a letter, and of course I conveniently forgot about it. But 3 or 4 months later, I get a phone call from a recruiter at Disney, and she says, "Hey, this is Lisa with Roy said to talk to you." And I'd wished upon a star. It was happening, right? The pixie dust was flying everywhere, and it was the moment. But what I found myself realizing and experiencing in that moment was, okay, maybe it's the right company, but it wasn't the right thing for me. I didn't want to do that kind of work. And it was a shock. But when I acknowledged that and I, thanked her, I got off the phone, then I could get on with my life and focus on what was going to matter for me. I ended up working at Disney and having other experiences at places like Apple and in the tech world. But what I found was I had to get closer to, and you can't really know sometimes, right? But I think the question of how did I get there? Well, I think Laura had mentioned, or Tammy was, getting close to those people that you were gravitating to as to their work, right? So one of those people for me was Stephen Covey. I reached out to him. He became a mentor, and you just start to interview or ask these people, how did you get to what you're doing, right? And they had a journey, right? So his journey was his dad wanted him to take over the family business, right? It's like, here, you're going to run the hotel business. He's like, no, I'm not. I want to teach, right? I want to share principles and write a book. And he's like, his dad said, well, those who teach, or those who do, those who teach, or don't teach, right? So it was a misalignment for his dad, but he ended up being very successful. And I think for us to be brave, to break out of fear, is a good starting point.
And just to add to Chris what said, I think also just to continue what Tammy and I have shared about the list of things. I think once you have that, also go internally, look at what you currently do now, and then see how you can incorporate a lot of these things, whether it's something you're passionate about or maybe something that you're talented in that you want to do in the future. Because more often than not, when people think about career development plan, it's always like looking at what's my next role, and then they start feeling miserable about their current role because they start ignoring things that may potentially add, especially if you're starting off in your career. It's always good to really experience the whole breadth and depth of what can you push the boundaries, push your limits as to what you can do, so that you have really an understanding of what you can do. And then going back to my point about incorporating that in your current career. So see how you can incorporate that, because you also want to nurture that while you're in the organization, because you may not necessarily get the same opportunity as Chris of getting an email from Disney, but at least you're making the most out of what you have now, and then work towards that destination we're talking about.
Building on what Renzi was saying, like that piece around building it into your career, because every time I have a coaching conversation with somebody, it's always like, this is great, but I have no time for this, right? I have so much work to do. I have so many meetings, etc. And is that part about two things? I think the first one is prioritization and making sure that you do carve time by prioritizing you and your own development in some ways. And then the other one is activating that curiosity mode in which you use that as your driver to guide where do you want to go next. So what is this person doing? What is this project about? What is this new role about? What is this new strategy? Like activating that curiosity mindset really helps to embed that career development mindset into everything you do, because you can do that in your day to day, as Francie was saying, just like by just activating that mindset in the things that you are doing every day.
I couldn't agree more, Laura. The curiosity, or I call it exploration mindset, is so powerful. And regardless of your spirituality, I think putting things out and seeing what comes back is such an amazing thing. And if you believe you want to pivot or go in a different direction, start to explore. Shadow someone who does the job, or ask questions of someone who has the job, or start to take on a new responsibility in your current role, or just explore and feel it. I have a current client who's doing the same, and she's, to your point, Chris, paralyzed with fear of leaving her current job because of all the comforts of benefits and salary and all these things. But her heart and her body and everything is aching for this other world that she wants to be in. And so she's been shadowing, and she's been spending, a couple hours a week doing this other thing. And it's like feeding her body. Her soul is like going in this other direction. And now she's just figuring out, how can I make it happen? So I think it's interesting when you listen to your body and your instincts and give it a chance to start to nurture, right, Renzi, and grow, what happens and how some of that fear dissipates and doors open. And, and if they don't, then maybe it's not the right time. But I think just give yourself the chance to test the waters to see what happens. Oh, and I'll also add, depending on if it's a total pivot or if it's something that you can do in your current company, oftentimes employers will be super supportive because they don't want to lose you as talent. So if you talk to your boss or your leadership or HR partners, you might have the opportunity to do that pivot in a much safer space because they want to keep you as the valued employee too.
Beautiful responses. I loved, there was a combination of Chris followed by Renzi, where Chris talked about Disney and Stephen Covey, and Renzi said, maybe you won't hear back from them, but you don't know if you don't explore. And so this idea of curiosity, where as HR professionals, we're so often problem solvers, and curiosity is getting in front of the problem, getting in front of the, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And so to all of those points, reach out to the Stephen Coveys that you admire. The very worst that can happen is that the email gets lost. You don't get a response, and not getting a response, well, you've taken a risk and it didn't pan out, but nobody to come at you and say, how dare you reach out to Stephen Covey? Who do you think you are? Right? That's the anxiety that runs in our brain. If we're able to get curious, if we're able to notice what's out there, then we get to really think about who we want to be when we grow up and design that. Beautiful responses. Thank you so much. So I'd love to hear from you. What are the mistakes that you see when people are thinking about their own career development plan, when people are thinking about their own futures? What are the mistakes and regrets that you see come up?
I think off the top is something related to what you just shared, Lauren, is kind of a sense of, that's kind of outside my comfort zone, or it's not going to work, right? And even just something as simple as being on LinkedIn and connecting dots, right? Connecting dots with people you don't know. I remember, most of us, we all experienced when LinkedIn wasn't even a thing, right? And I had a friend that he kept trying to get me on this, and I said, like, there's no pictures, like, what is this thing, right? And he made this clear. He's like, look, this is going to be the future for not just you, for everybody, right, in their careers. And he was right. And the interesting thing is over the years, I would just start connecting, right, with people I didn't know, and just kind of what we're doing now, right? We've just met, right, all of us, and yet we're having this really powerful conversation, and that's available, right? in our lives. And it used to be, maybe it was, more of an exclusive few or just a few countries here or there, but actually this is the whole world, right? And we're connected in a way that, it's just a reach out away. And the opportunities I've had have happened on LinkedIn, right? It was usually, I just started kind of blasting out these connections, and some people I knew would say, well, you don't even know them. Like you're connecting with them. And these turned into me getting call from, Apple, and they're saying, hey, you're writing this on LinkedIn. We're interested in, what you're doing, and would turn into jobs. And so you never know. It's kind of like the alchemist, right, approach, where you're putting something out into the universe that is you, and it's a future version of you, and you're telling your story, and that becomes a magnet to what you're doing, and where that overlaps with the needs of these companies that are also seeing the future. You're going to find something special, so the magic, kind of that big magic can happen. And just, I think the other thing that people get stuck in sometimes is a very kind of rules-based definition of their world, right? That things are as they'd seem, and that's just not the case, right? What we see exists because it was built in the past, right? These were decisions that were made so that that job description looks like it does now. The functions and the organizations that we experience in the business world today are as they are. But what's happening today is we're building the future. We're making decisions that are going to create what that looks like in the future. And those people that built that before were no smarter than you and I. And that's something that you can shape, right? So how do you shape those experiences? And I think Laura mentioned before too, is you kind of gravitate towards these people that are like-minded, right? And so if you see that, and it starts small. I mean, to Tammy's point, you don't have to make you don't have to jump ship all at once. I think that's an old world mindset too, is, hey, I've got to just be all in on the startup and put my whole family at risk. Like, well, maybe you can phase that in, right, over time, and do kind of a part-time version of that, and just be building, but do it really well with those people, and something magical will start to emerge.
I think the biggest problem I see with individuals in career development is them not giving themselves enough credit for the value and experience and strength that they have. I see it happen time and time again, where they underplay what they're bringing to the table. And whether it's experience, whether it's skills, whether it's worldview, whether it's talent, natural gifts, whatever those things are, I always tell people that the combination of all of their stuff, nobody else has. You might, on paper, someone might be similar, but nobody has exactly what they have, and they need to kind of own that. And not to be generic with special sauce, right? But like, no one else has that. So like, own it with pride and step into whatever it is you're going after with a little bit more confidence and boldness.
And what I see from just from my point of view, a lot of people expect there to be some sort of formality around this process, that they expect some sort of job description, and I should aspire to this specific role. And I think we talked a little bit about that before. Instead, what I think is more helpful is for you to be part of that conversation, to your point, Chris, to build what that next role looks like for you. And so that involves having those brave conversations with leadership at your company. And if that opportunity doesn't exist in your company, then finding a place and a space that you could have those kinds of conversations. But I think that often we fall, we try to find, or we have an expectation that someone else is going to necessarily show us the exact path, but nobody can always know what's in our own heads or in our hearts. So we need to really be able to plan our own journeys and make create space for that.
I like what you're saying there, Joe. I work with clients now, and then this is the biggest problem all the time with clients. When I look at their entire employee experience, is there's no clear career path. And when you start digging into like, what is the problem about this clear career path? People are expecting the career path is basically a promotion year on year, every second year, that everything is all about vertical movements. So going back to your point, Chris and Joe, about like people not necessarily have clarity, but just enjoy that journey. For example, in my case, I didn't know I'm going to end up in HR. It was an accidental discovery because what I was doing, all I was doing was just following what I'm passionate about, following what actually energizes me, following what motivates me. And then I just landed like here I am now, like running my own thing. So people should focus more on, rather than the title, focus on what really energizes them now, what motivates them now, so that they're not going to get into this trap of like, oh, but I want to become a director, I want to become a VP. Because oftentimes this is the problem with people looking into long-term career planning, is they aspire for a role, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. You can have whatever title you want to have, but sometimes we get so stuck up with the role that we forget about, okay, I got the role now, but like it's not exactly how I envision it to be. So to your point, Chris, it's in the future we should be creating what that looks like for us. It could be a mix match of everything, and maybe I don't want to do full time. I want to do like bits and pieces of these things, and at the same time do the other things. Maybe that's your career plan. It's not necessarily professional only. It could be a mix of what you want to do personally, but also what you want to do in your work life.
Yeah, I'm building on top of that. I do see career development kind of like a tree, right? Like you are rooted in some principles or some idea of where do you want to go, but you are flexible, so you go where the wind takes you. Because one of the issues I see is people saying like, I want to get this promotion by this time, and they don't look at like what are the alternatives, or like lateral moves that may actually accelerate you or even jump over that title to the following level, right? So that piece about having a common purpose, and you are rooted into your values and where do you want to go, but also like being flexible to use the environment to help you get there, super important. And then the other thing, and especially important for women, I'm going to say that is around advocating for yourself. So as Joe was saying, do not expect somebody to just come to you and discover it's like, oh yeah, I have this role for you. It's like you have to be brave to really share what are your dreams, what do you want to do, and making sure that that's here around around you, so people can help you on your journey. If it's a secret journey, then you won't receive any help.
Thank you. Such great advice. I always say stop before the but. We all have these dreams, and our gut tells us what our dreams are, and then we tell ourselves why we can't have it. But I only have experience in this area, but I'm a generalist, I can't specialize, but I can't open my own business because I need benefits and salary and all of that. And maybe that's true. Maybe that ends up being true. But if you're starting with the but, you're talking yourself out of the progress that you want. You're talking yourself out of being the tree and blowing in the wind. You're talking yourself out of the potential lateral moves that may lead to the upward mobility that you want. You're talking yourself out of the opportunity to run your own business doing exactly the thing that you want to do. And there is so much opportunity. So now I want to hear from each of you. We've got a little over 10 minutes left. And I'd love to hear from each of you a short story about a time that you got brave in your own career development plan and stepped out of what you thought was going to happen, or what you thought was the only possibility for what was going to happen. What are your stories?
If I can start, I think this where I started like setting up my own business, it was during the pandemic. It was also the height of my career. Like as a head of employee experience for an organization, I was doing like everything well. Like people were praising me and this and that. But going back every day after work, I knew something was missing. Like I enjoyed what I was doing, but something was missing. So I worked with the coach just to understand like what is wrong. Like I love my job, I get satisfaction from it, but I feel like there's something is missing. And then we did all these exercises that Tamil and Lara like were talking about. So listed down all these different things. That's like what I'm passionate about, what I'm talented about, what I'm skilled about, like what do I want to do, like really put together, like uncover like what's inside my head. And then I start putting the pieces of the puzzle together and realize, oh my God, little did I know, I'm already preparing for what I want to do in the future. But going back to Chris, it's just taking that leap of faith, like being brave, being courageous to take that bold first step. Like, okay, like let me do it. Because for time, I thought about it, but I was always haphazard about taking that decision because like, well, should I do it now? But what if I do it? To your point, Lauren, like but I want the security of getting money every month. I want that security of like having a team, having someone to praise me, give me approval, and all these different things. And then I realized like, actually, I will feel more fulfilled and satisfied by doing my own thing. So then I started putting together and building what that might look like for me, like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. And it was scary. I can tell you that it was scary because like even after like taking that leap of faith and resign, and then did I make the right decision? You start questioning like whether you did the right thing or not. And then people were telling me like, oh, but you're really good at what you do. Like, why you're resigning? Like, not knowing what's happening. It's pandemic. Like, what are you gonna do? So people are scared for you, but it's only you who can really reassure yourself because you know what you want based on your experience, based on what you want for yourself. You know how much commitment you need to put into it, how much work you are willing to do to make things happen because no one else will do that for you.
Yeah, I think one of the things too that and Renzi sharing that, thank you. You know, there's a reality to this that like I think sometimes people and I experienced was you have this dream job in your head that you want and it's so perfect, everything's perfect about it, and that may happen, right? And a version of that will happen eventually. But what you find in the between is you're going to take on things that, will have parts of that, like certain percentage of that. And so you just have to be okay with that, those building blocks. So I had a dream list of jobs, and it ended up this one. And this was once I became kind of focused on what I wanted to do, which was leadership and culture. And Dell reached out to me and, it's like, well, it's not my first pick. It's probably not my 10th pick. It's not even on the list, but okay. And I went there and I was, but it was a kind of typical HR job, but I was looking for opportunities to insert myself into the conversations around culture and leadership. And so I formed a team. We wrote a white paper. I was in an all hands meeting, and what I found actually was initially they were cutting a lot of people from the company. It was a bad time, right? The stock price tanked, the PC market was deteriorating. 3 of the VPs that hired me were gone in 3 or 4 months, like they left. And so it was not ideal circumstances. I think the other thing is don't expect that it's just going to be ideal circumstances, but just be thinking, I think this has been a theme that's been shared here is how can I be brave, right? How can I navigate this and just where you need to focus? And so that was what I did. I was in all hands and Michael Dell asked, hey, if you guys have ideas about, what we can do to transform the business, let me know. So I put together a white paper, 33 pages. It basically outlined all the problems of the culture and here's where we need to go in the future, to be $100 billion business. I sent this to him. And I get pulled into a meeting with my manager and she says, what was this email to Michael again? And, like, this was a potentially career limiting moment for me. I said, well, he asked in all hands, he wanted to know if we have ideas. I've got some ideas. It happened to be a pretty big white paper and it covers a lot of topics of things we can do to be more people centric, build the culture and lead differently. And she goes, well, Bob's aware. And he was like one of the SVPs of HR. And so this was something that I was on the edge, right? The edge of reason, you could say. But interestingly, the next morning, Michael responded at 5 a.m. and said, wow, huge respect for this initiative. Like, what are the next steps? And so I ended up consulting the CEO or the founder of the company, spending time with him and the C-levels and other leaders. And something that I like, it just emerged, right? So I think wherever your space is that you're in, it may be taking that huge leap like Renzi did, building your business. It may be inside of a company. It doesn't have to be, engaging with the CEO, but it may just be, hey, how can I look at something different or maybe influence with this team or that team or get closer to what I want to do. And so just being brave, in the small steps, but do it. I think that's the key.
I'll share my career prior to what I do now. Was I was in marketing and advertising, and it's a very high-paced, fast burn, deadline-oriented world. And in the beginning, I thrived, loved the go 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 kind of world. But I found in hindsight, I was having these like every 2 year kind of churn and burn cycles where I was either on a go get a new job, seek promotion, or change brands. I was just this constant, like I needed something to kind of refresh myself to keep getting through. And so I wound up getting to that stage about year 17 in the mix of it. And I just hit a big wall, massive burnout. I started working with a coach, Renzi. So we were right there with each other. And I had this moment of, I lovingly call it my midlife crisis of what am I going to do? Is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? And have these 2 year burnout cycles. And that's when I realized that, I had a heart for helping other people grow in their careers. I had a heart for helping people to develop into great leaders. I had some bumps myself along the road, and I decided that I just wanted to be the best at helping people do that stuff that showed up on my love list, right? So I started taking coaching classes and just totally fell in love with it and decided that's what I was going to do. Petrified. I can't do that as a full-time job, like, stuck with the golden handcuffs. And that's the life I'm going to lead. And I wound up getting laid off of my job. It was all very like serendipitous. And I took the leap. It kind of forced me to take the leap, but I took the leap, and it's been the bravest, craziest thing I've ever done. Never in a million years did I plan on being an entrepreneur. I had aspirations to run an ad agency someday, to be the Don Draper at the top, but I found out, and the knowledge I want to pass on to everybody else is, just because you're good at something doesn't mean that's where your heart and passion lies. And if you do pursue passion and something you're good at, like those things can come together, you can be very successful at it. And so I found, within a year and a half, I was making equivalent, if not higher salary than what I was in my corporate setting. So it was a very brave, bold, scary move. And some days are so scary. But I found it to be a crazy, rewarding moment in my life. And I'm not encouraging everyone to go start your own companies, but I am encouraging you to listen to your bodies and your hearts and what it is that really makes you happy, and what you're good at. So.
And I'm gonna build on top of Tammy, because I was thinking, and I was counting. I think I have been laid off like 4 times in my career so far, and always because of organizational changes, economic decisions, restructure of the organization. And I remember every time it hurts, right? Because it's like I have been trying so far to get to this role, and then you're taking this role out of me. And to Tammy's story, at the end of that, after each one of those bumps, I landed in a better place because it gave me the time to really think about what do I want to do next. So that luxury of having the time to think and really refocus where you want to go is critical. And like I think I have learned much more from disappointments that probably I learned from success. Even for example, when I asked to move to the US, this was like 7 years ago, and the first answer was like, no way. And they're like, okay. And then I keep trying and I keep advocating, and then it was like, I'm not sure yet. And then eventually happened, right? Because it's that combination of like knowing what you want to do next, or having a bit of an idea of your direction, and then advocating for what you want. And then when things don't go the right way, or the way that you were expecting, just activate that curiosity and learning mindset to see, okay, so what can I learn from this, and how can I use this to my advantage? So it will be a bit of my brave story. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll wrap up too. Tammy, gosh, you might as well have been telling my story. I went on that 2-year churn and burn cycle too, and when I look back at that, it was because of short-term thinking. I had grown up in, if you look at my LinkedIn profile and resume, I had grown up in comp and benefits and did really good in it, built a name for myself where had recruiters and other companies, contacting me on LinkedIn all the time for opportunities. And what I had learned from that is that I can't get distracted by a better title or better salary. You can always get that somewhere else, right? But that's not necessarily fulfilling my own needs. And so what I've been able to do in my current role is really create space for me to expand into the other areas that I want to expand into. And that's really helped create more longevity here, and given me more of a sense of purpose where I'm not feeling the burnout. I'm not feeling like I'm stuck or pigeonholed. And that's my advice to everyone, that's listening today. Just because you're approached by an opportunity that might seem flashy, take a moment to really assess whether that fits your journey, because it might make sense in the short term, but you might end up causing problems down the road. So stay focused, listen to yourself, because you always know what's best for yourself in the long run.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your own stories. I heard a little bit of my story in each of yours. I coached on the side for years because I didn't think it could be the whole career. And so I lived this sort of martyrdom where I helped other people follow their dreams, but like it wasn't for me. And coming together, realizing it was, and a lot of you said today, network, get a coach. Even if you're a high achiever, I'm a real high achiever, and I thought I was supposed to know everything myself, and I couldn't figure out me. So I thought this was just the way it is. And whether you physically hire a coach and you're paying somebody, whether you find a mentor, whether you reach out to the Stephen Coveys or whoever your Stephen Covey is, be out there, network, connect with all of us on LinkedIn, connect with each other. There were so many people in the comments saying hi. A hi means connect with me. A hi means I'm here for the same reason you are, to learn about my own career development, my own opportunities. So get out there, network, find who you want to be when you grow up. And I want to thank you, panelists, for being here today. This was such an incredible discussion, so much energy. And I look forward to being connected with you all in the future. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.